Welcome to the Friday the 13th YouTube channel, Metalheads. Today, you're going to be watching a fantastic interview with the one and only The Rods. Now, as we all know, The Rods were formed back in the early 80s and did some fantastic cult classic albums as Wild Dogs, Let Them Eat Metal. So I'd like to thank Carl Canedy for the interview and also Dave Feinstein. Thank you guys for such a great interview. You guys rock. Best of the future. So please share on social media and also leave comments. This is a great interview, and please check out the new album, Rattle the Cage, released on Massacre Records. Thanks for watching, Metalheads. Stay tuned for more interviews coming soon. Greetings, Metalheads. We're talking to Carl Canedy from The Rods. Welcome to Friday the 13th. Carl, how are you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, and I love the name Friday the 13th.
Well, I was born on the 13th.
You were? Wow, nice.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So Friday the 13th, as you may know, has been going since 1988. It used to be a fanzine back in the day.
Yeah, amazing. Long time. Congratulations on
and
that.
I've never stopped. I've been doing it all this time with no breaks.
Wow, that's impressive.
Thank you, my friend. So I'm going to ask you some warm-up questions first, Carl. As a drummer, who inspired you, and was drums your first instrument, or was anybody in your family that was a drummer or a musician?
Nobody in my family. It was from the time I was 4.5. All I wanted to do was play drums, and quite honestly, my book is going. I'm announcing my book. I'll announce it here. That'll be coming out for pre-sale shortly. But in the book, I talk about how I went to a wedding reception my mother took me to, and there was what do you call it? Whatever. I'm trying to think. Whatever they call it when you decommissioned army tank in front, and I remember that. And then when I went inside, there was a set of drums, and it was a red sparkle set, and it was at American Legion, so it was a low stage, and it had the little metal railing, and then there's a break in the middle of it. I don't know, they're very common, and the drums were right in the middle, and I was just like, oh my God, it was like white light and the Hallelujah Singers, and from that point on, all I wanted to do was play drums. But now, after writing the book and going back over these things, I never really knew what drums were. I just knew all I wanted to do was play. Let me at those things was kind of the attitude I had. So that was what it was for me. I didn't, because we were poor and we moved. My mother and I moved quite a bit. So I enrolled in school late. And so when I wanted to play drums, and all the drum chairs were filled, the drum slot. So she gave me a clarinet. And so that was my first instrument. For a year, I played clarinet. And
Okay.
and I can still get sound out of it.
That's cool. So was there anybody else in your family that played any instruments, like your father?
No, nobody else played anything. So mother, father, it was like no musical. And so I have a cousin who played drums, but that wasn't for years later. But my biggest influence was Carmine Appice. And I got to study with Carmine when I was 19 or 20, and it totally changed everything for me as a drummer. And also with Tony Williams. A little bit later, I got to study with Tony Williams, and that was huge. But Carmine taught me to read. Carmine taught me a lot of things, how to balance myself on the set. He just had a great attitude and a great way of teaching, and very kind and patient and helpful. And Tony Williams was more cerebral. I didn't know at the time he was really studying music composition, but so a lot of the things I learned from Tony Williams I apply to productions because of us. Eventually we just sat around and talked. After a few months of taking lessons, I was never going to be at the level of Tony Williams as a jazz drummer. It was never my interest to be a jazz drummer, and the guy was just phenomenal. So he was off the charts, as far as how he played. But we worked on things. But ultimately, we just wound up talking about music and his approach to music. And to get that insight from a master was incredible knowledge.
So were there the two main influences? Was there anybody else that inspired you?
Well, locally, there was a drummer named Denny Hall, played with a band called the Cassels. And they were the big local band. And he was a great drummer, but he was also really kind, and he showed me things. And when I first started, I didn't have money. I started taking lessons, and I was going and giving the guy my $2 a week, and he told me I sucked. And so after I don't know how many months, a few months, I started thinking, I'm not the brightest guy, but I thought, oh, I'm giving money to this guy who tells me I suck. That doesn't make any sense. So I stopped. So I wasn't taking lessons. So when Denny Hall, he would show me things and he would take time. And that was, that taught me a couple of things. One is I've always been tried to share knowledge and be kind to other musicians because he showed that kindness to me. And it was very important to me that he did that. It meant so much to me. It made me feel uh, like I was seen as a drummer. And even though I wasn't the same level as he was, he valued my talent and tried to help me. And so he was a big influence at that. Plus, he was a great drummer. He was able to cop all the parts, play all the parts exactly, whether it was Mitch Mitchell from Hendrix or Keith Moon or you name it, he was able to play it all perfectly.
Well,
So
you mentioned Carmen. I mean, I actually worked with his brother Vinny at one festival.
mhm,
I was drum teching for him for one festival. He was a really nice guy, real down to earth
mhm.
guy. And we got on so well together, both of us. He had a lot of respect for me the way I helped him out and stuff.
Well, I know from what Rob said, you're great tech, great guy to hang with and great tech.
Thank
And it
you.
seems
Yeah.
like I met Vinny a couple of times and he's always been very nice. And Carmine is very cool. Carmine is down to earth, no airs. He's that guy.
Right. And
Not
so what was your first band then? Was it the Rods or was there
it.
something else before?
It was not. My first band was a band called Wadsworth Anthem, and let me just see. I have a picture. I have a little mock-up
Okay.
somewhere. But anyway, so Wadsworth Anthem was the first time I went into the studio, and I was probably 16 or 15. And there were a couple of incarnations of that band, and but it was a really great experience for me, and it was basically my band, and so it was my first experience having my own band, and that was also good and bad. You learn from your mistakes, but also it was kind of cool to guide that, and we did pretty well on a local level.
Did you do any albums or anything?
We didn't, but we did get because of the girlfriends. Uh, we were able to go. They were at Elmira College, and they got us free studio time at this recording studio at Elmira College. So we recorded "Tin Soldier," "I'm Tired" by Savoy Brown, and so was one of there's one other song, can't think of it. But we recorded three songs, and "I'm Tired" was really a cool song because we love Savoy Brown. But then later on in the '80s, early '80s, when I was producing, Kim Simmons was introduced to me by Jack Starr and wound up staying at my house for a few months. So we were roomies for a while, and that was a big deal for me because he was a great guy, and I was I always loved Savoy Brown. So
Okay, cool. See, David's just joined us. Hi, David.
David,
Hello.
Hey, how you
the
doing,
Rock,
brother?
How you doing?
Welcome to Friday 13th YouTube channel.
you got the
Yeah.
Rock here. The Rock is
I-
on.
Yeah, the rock is here. The rock is on.
Well, thank you for doing this interview. Like I said to Carl, this is the very first time I've interviewed you guys. And I grew up listening to the Rods. As you can see, this album behind me, this is the baby that got me into your music at the age of 12.
Wow. I'm so sorry, Jason. We corrupted you.
I'm so sorry.
The funny thing is, guys, I saw this album cover in a record store and I never even knew you were. I just saw the album cover. I thought, this is an amazing cover. Bought the album just by the album cover and I just hooked on the band ever since from the age of 12.
Wow.
Huh.
That's a great story. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So I was just talking to Carl about his influences. So Dave, who was your influences as a guitar player?
My influences were, Jimi Hendrix, Richie Blackmore, Jeff Beck, those early guys, some Pete Townsend stuff too, Um, those are the early influences for me, and basically, I'm a self-taught player, so I never really took lessons. So I'm not a person that's going to play like any stuff like Yngwie or Eddie Van Halen or anything like that. But those were the early influences right there. More so like the blues-based guitar players.
Right. So what guitar, mate, do you play now? What guitars are you playing?
For my whole career, I've played Gibson guitars, and for a lot of the years, I played Gibson Melody Maker, which was back in the day, they were the entry level guitars. They were very cheap. They were like the cheapest one you could get from Gibson, but they're a great guitar, really well built. And I got a few of those, and I also used like Les Paul Juniors for a lot of years. But in the pre in the in the not probably in the last, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 years maybe, I got introduced to this guitar only by chance because a friend of mine um, took this guitar in for some work that he did for somebody. And it's a Steinberger, and it's one of the early ones made in the 80s. And he said, "I think you're going to like it." And I tried it out, and I really loved it. It's kind of odd because it's a headless guitar, doesn't have the headstock on it. So it was kind of weird to get used to it, but it's got a great sound. It fits me perfectly. It's just the right size. So I've been using that guitar, in the last, well, probably the last 8 or 9, 10 years.
Okay, you might want to put your cell phone a bit higher, David. That's it. Thank you, brother.
Oh, that's better. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
that's better, brother. That's okay. So I'm going to ask you guys now, how did you guys hook up back in the day? Because you formed back in 1980. How did you hook up? Where did you meet?
Well, we hooked up. I mean, I can tell you my side of the story on that. I was in a music store. Brian Miles was a band I played with in upstate New York. We actually rehearsed in the garage where Elf rehearsed in the house. So I would see David, but we really didn't know each other per se. But then I knew Joey DeMeo, and so my band Colakis would play some shows. Joey played, and then David
The
and
old
Joey.
man of war.
That's right. That's right. And one I'm in the music store one day, and our light guy Dennis, who's still with us, comes in, and now Denny had been my roommate on the road with Kalakis for years. Like we roomed together. So he comes in and he says very formally, "Mr. Feinstein and Mr. DeMaio would like to see you outside." And I'm like, "Whoa, what happened here? What's going on?" I'm like, Denny, and Denny's speaking to me very formally, like, "Come on, we've roomed together. We have secrets, pal. There's no, you don't have to be formal with me, buddy." And so out to the car I go, and David and Joey are in the front seat, and Joey turns around. Now I'm playing with Kalakis at the time, I believe, and he turns around and he points to me. "Do you want to play with men or do you want to play with boys?" And I was like, "Well, men, of course. I don't want to play with boys. I want to play
Oh,
with
you wanted to play
men,
with girl? You wanted to play
I
with
want to play
girls?
with girls." And then after that, I wanted to play with real men. And so the three of us worked on some things. And Joey and David had done Thunder. And so, that's for me, that's how it happened. And then the three of us got together and we worked on some material together. And it was pretty awesome, honestly. But it didn't go anywhere. And so that's when David and I decided to start the Rods.
So who came up with the name The Rods, and did you have any other names?
That's a drug.
Oh,
That's a drug haze. We have no idea. None of us can
yeah.
remember. It was so long ago. We have a bunch of theories, but I'm not sure we actually have a definitive answer.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, your first record was released back in 1980 called Rock Hard. I mean, not many people know about that, Mark. A lot of people only know you from Wild Dogs onwards. They didn't realize that you did an album and an EP before that. How successful were they for you back in the day?
Well, I don't know how many Rock has, but we printed 1,000 of Rock Hard, and I might have 2 or maybe 3 if I scrounge. How many do you have, Dave?
Yeah, I probably got just a handful, of the original ones that we just had printed up. We just did it on our own, printed them up and to use for our own advertisement back then. So, but that was the album that got us to deal with the Arista.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we have no idea where the rest of the 1,000 went because none of us have more than half a dozen, and the rest are gone. And we didn't make any money on them either. So.
I mean, that album, Wild Dogs, is a brilliant album cover. I mean, that's your mascot now, isn't it? The three-headed dogs, the wild dogs, Whose idea was it to come up with the 3 dogs?
Well, that's Les Edwards, right? So Les Edwards is a great artist. And I don't think his career hasn't gone in the direction of doing album covers. And Arista was the one who found him. And so I know he's been asked recently about this, and he's like, I can't remember. It's like he's big body of work. And to me, the Wild Dogs, Cerberus doesn't mean anything to him really. He was kind of surprised that it's become as iconic as it has. So it was less. But SPV, Ali Khan was the man who said, let's bring the Wild Dogs, let's bring Cerberus forward, and let's bring him as more metallic. So we came up with that concept that David and I were talking about it, and we said, let's make it a metal dog that's crushing the city and destroying the city, and we'll make it an ominous metal dog. And Eric Philippe did a great job recreating that idea.
So that would have been for the album Brotherhood of Metal.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Then, so I mean, would you say Wild Dogs is your cult classic album, or would you say Let 'Em Eat Metal?
For me, it's Wild Dogs.
Yeah, I mean, people remember that. I mean, it's funny because everybody has their own opinion as to like what their favorite album is, what their favorite song is, and Let Them Eat Metal was pretty popular because of the album cover, but the Wild Dogs album, recording wise, sound wise, wasn't really, and I don't know if Carl agrees or not, but I don't think it was the greatest sounding album. And it was different for us because we had a different producer, recorded it over in the UK and things like that. So, but because of the Dogs, it is the album that I think everybody remembers,
Yeah,
I mean, it's iconic. And
Yeah.
I agree. Sonically, that album is the engineer was really not, and I hate to say he wasn't talented, because I'm sure he must have been talented, but he wasn't with us. He had me playing harder than I've ever played, and no one has ever asked me to play harder. I play hard as it is, and he wanted me to play harder. And I even broke a bass drum beater, which is unheard of, as you know, you drum tech. So
yeah.
and the drum heads were tuned so low that they were the tension rods were just finger tightened. They were all loose. So the drum heads were just totally loose. And they were basically just the only thing the tension rods and the rims were doing were keeping the drum head from flying off when I hit it.
So they would have been rattling then, wouldn't they, Carl? They would have been rattling every time you hit them.
That's right. They were very loose, and I had to play so hard. And so that takes away a lot of finesse and whatever. So it was an uncomfortable experience. I didn't think the guitar tones, David gets great guitar tones. The Rock has the tone. He's the tone meister. And it didn't do him justice. And so, and the same thing with the bass. So I wasn't happy sonically with it when all was said and done, but it wasn't like it was bad. I think it's a great album, some great songs. And, so it is what it is. And now after being remastered, I think it sounds pretty good. But, it took modern technology to remaster it. And now I think when people hear it, they're not going to hear it the way we heard it right after we mixed it in 82.
So how does the remastered version sound compared to the original? Because I've not heard the remastered version of Wild Dogs.
I think it's warmer. The guitars are fatter. There was a lot of 2 kilohertz for people who know frequencies in the guitar, and that competes with the vocal. And it was just very harsh. And now the guitars are fatter. The drums are toned down a little bit, so you don't have as much low end rumble from the drums. And so, like now when you have 3-band compression and you have multi-band EQ, you can dial things in, as you know, and that's what's happened with mastering. So it's a whole different ballpark now. And so you can find it's on any of the streaming services. That's the mastered version you're going to listen to, the remastered, updated.
Okay, I mean the next album, Let Them Eat Metal. As a young kid at the age of 14, I mean, come on, man, Testosterone was going on. The girl there with the vibrator and the hand stockings and suspenders. I mean, what were you guys thinking back then?
Well, it was a funny thing. David had been friends with Sherry, that model, who was our friend, and then Sherry and I became very good friends. And we were talking about doing the album cover, and I tossed out the idea of, wouldn't it be cool if you had, like, for Let Them Eat Metal, maybe a silver vibrator and put it in a banana peel or something. And I go, but where would you get that back then? You didn't have Adam and Eve and all the places where you can order adult paraphernalia. And so she goes, I have one. It was gold. So of course I didn't say, oh my God, we can't use it because it's gold, because I want silver. She had it, but as far as I know, David may know differently, but all I know is she went with this. His name was Ezra, I believe. I'm not sure from the studio, whatever, the name, David.
Oh,
And
no, that was
Ira Merk, whatever,
Isaac Merker. Isaac
Isaac
Merker.
Merker.
Yeah, Dana
So
Merker was the photographer.
right, and she went. So she went there. I didn't go. She went on her own. She told me all about it after, how the old guy, and she had a hole in her underwear and the pubes were coming out, and she goes, the old guy was there and just doing all these poses, and the guy didn't flinch. Obviously being a photographer, you've seen it all. But I had no idea what was going to happen at that photo session, so maybe David did.
Yeah, no, I was at the photo session, and I'm not even sure it was I'm trying to remember. It might not have even been at his studio. It might have been at her house. But I remember Dana is a male, and of course he was there, his wife was there, I was there, and Sherry was there, and I'm thinking it probably was at a studio, with the lighting and everything. But yeah, it was basically the four of us there, and she just posed, did a bunch of different poses, and that's the one we chose for the album cover.
Did you borrow that vibrator from Lips from Anvil?
No.
Actually, I think maybe he borrowed it from her.
I'll tell him when I see him again.
Yeah.
Awesome. Did you get any flack for the album cover? Did it get a lot of, because these days you won't get away with that on an album cover, would you? If you tried it these days.
No way now. No way. Cancel culture.
We did get some flack for it, only because it was, I think it made it onto national television as like one of the, how horrible it was and what a bad thing it was for the younger generation to see and be involved with and all that. Of course that was then. I mean, like right now, it's nothing compared to like what you're seeing nowadays, on TV or whatever. But
yeah, it was on Phil Donahue show, and it did corrupt youth. And Jason, you're an example of the youth it corrupted.
Great album cover, guys. I loved it as a kid.
Hey, John Lennon and Yoko were naked on a cover,
Right.
So,
now that was obscene, I thought. That was obscenity.
I mean, you guys like kind of broke up after Heavy Than Thou, didn't you, in 1986? What happened? What went wrong? Because I know you, David, you did the Feinstein product album, The Wish, was released on Steam. What did you do, Carl, after that?
Well, nothing was happening for us. We didn't have a manager, and we were basically on our own. I was doing productions. David bought a restaurant, which is the Hollywood in Cortland, and it's phenomenal. And we go there all the time. It's been my longest endorsement, my career. But it's a great restaurant. So David was busy getting that up and running. Gary was on the road with Savoy Brown. So we just basically went our own ways until we played some gigs, one-offs, but they were few and far between. So there's really no reason for us to continue on. And as one of the people close to us who was handling said, no one gives a fuck about the rods. Now, I don't mean to swear, but that was the quote. And so we were basically like, okay, well, we'll do our own thing and we'll figure out what's going on. So we never really broke up. We just kind of drifted off and did whatever, and we all stayed in touch. So
that's good. I mean, I know, Carl, a lot of people don't know that you used to produce albums back in the day. I mean, you did Anthrax's album and some rave. You did a brilliant production on that Anthrax Fistful of Metal.
Thank you. Yeah, I did Armed and Dangerous and Spreading the Disease as well.
Yeah, brilliant albums, man. What about you, David? I mean, obviously you're related to Ronnie James. I mean, did you guys ever actually tour with Dio or Black Sabbath back in the day, having that connection?
Well, about the last 10 years of his life, we were in touch with each other. I mean, other than that, being that he lived on one end of the United States and I lived on the other, and plus he was on the road like constantly. It was either Sabbath, Dio, Heaven and Hell, whatever, it was like he was never really home that much. But about 10 years before, he passed, he was starting to come back up here to Cortland, his hometown. His parents were still here, and his parents were one of them was getting sick, and then the one got sick after that. So he was visiting quite often. So I started to go out there and visit him at that time. And I would go out to stay there for a week or so. And we actually worked on songs, and we talked about, maybe doing an Elf album again, where he would play bass again, kind of like the old days. And we would work on some material, but it was, bits and pieces, because, I'd go out there for a week or so, and then he would leave to go on tour for 3 months. And, I'd go back out there for another week, and he'd leave again. But we never got around to, unfortunately, doing that, but we did get to see a lot of each other that last 10 years of his life.
Yeah, God rest in peace, Ronnie. But yeah, you guys came back and did the Vengeance album in 2011. So how excited was it for you to do that new album back then?
Well, it's kind of exciting because it was like we're doing an album again, and it was really, when we got back together and started doing some jobs, and we realized, because of the internet, that we did have some fans, around the world. And that was kind of like a boost for us, because, back in the day, without the internet, we didn't know who knew about us, And so to actually write songs and to do an album was like a big deal, at that time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Was it a successful album for you as a comeback album?
It seemed to do very well. Critics loved it. I'm not sure about sales, but the critics loved it, and for us, it was just great to be back out there. And of course, because of the internet, we really believed that quote that no one cared about the rods. But then, with the advent of the internet, we were starting to get emails from fans around the world. So we started to realize that, hey, wait a minute, these people know about us around the world. How's that possible? And they love the band. So, but our friend Hans Daka, um, part of the DNC, which I nicknamed the Drunken Norwegian Crew, and I'll just tell the story quickly. Hans Daka brought us to Norway. That was our first festival gig that we had played since, kind of taking a hiatus. And so Hans and his brother and his friends were going to help us get on stage and get off. And you know how important that is to have those extra hands there when the time comes to get on and off. So they were planning on helping us get on and off. Well, when the time came, they were drunk. They were drunk. They could barely find the stage, let alone help us carry gear. So now we always refer to the DNC. They show up wherever they can, and they're no longer drinking when they try to help us. But anyway, Hans brought us over to Norway. That was our first, time of going out of the country and doing a festival like that. And so, at the point with Vengeance, it really opened up a lot of doors.
Right, okay. And then the next album, Brotherhood of Metal on Steam, I'm a great album cover, as you can see behind me. It was revamped, the album cover, like I say, Metal Dogs. How successful was that for you? I mean, it's a great album cover, by the way. That looked great as a t-shirt.
Yeah. Well, we have those, I think, don't we? Do we still have some?
Extra large.
Extra large. We'll look and see if we have one. We'll send it to you.
Thanks, Cal.
20 quid. But anyway, it was successful. It did very well, and it's great reviews, and it was really good to be back out and really recognize the fans really love the album. So it was the best received album we've had since our first album. So it was really good to see that reaction.
I actually reviewed it for you on my website at the time.
Okay, so this answer carefully, because the shirt will depend on the answer. Was it a good review or a bad review?
4 out of 5.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good review, my friend. I mean, like I say, how do you see these last two albums, like The Vengeance and Brotherhood of Metal, as a progression from the previous earlier albums when you came back?
Well, I'll let David answer this first, and then I'll answer.
Well, I think that I was just going to say that, the Brotherhood of Metal was a step up from the Vengeance album. Vengeance album was almost like, kind of like starting over again, because so much time had gone by. I mean, from the first album on, we lived it like every day. That's what we did. We rehearsed every day, we recorded, we did the thing. And then with this long gap in between, it was like kind of like starting over, because the recording process were changing. It wasn't like, the first album we were lugging 2-inch tapes in and out of hotels and stuff like that, and now all of a sudden it's digital stuff, and so it was kind of starting over. And but Brotherhood of Metal, to me, I think it was a step up. It was like better than Vengeance, not so much better, but different. It was like kind of better in certain ways, but it was a progression. And thinking about it now, and then thinking about the new album now, it's even greater, the newest album. So we're moving along. We're progressing. So
Right. My take on it is, we kind of turned the corner, and what happened was, I was really busy at the time, so David was really tasked with doing the songwriting. So I sent him lyrics for Brotherhood of Metal, but he rearranged those lyrics for the most part and wrote a killer tune. I wrote 1982, which I actually wrote the music for and whatnot, and the lyrics and all. But the most part, David has taken over the songwriting. Now I'll send him lyrics like on the new album, and he'll like Rattle the Cage. I sent him the basic germ of the idea and the chorus lines, but he's writing the material, and he's writing. It's a step up, and it's like we've turned the corner on the songwriting, and of course our focus on performances. And I think that's why the new album is so great. But I mean, David has really stepped up as songwriter, and it's been fantastic. It's the best time the band has had, and he's focused on his voice as well as lyrics. And so that's a huge improvement all along. And then having Freddie in the band, which we can't not mention, Mr. Villano, but he's the new secret weapon. He's energized us. He plays so well. He and I play the Thunder Twins, as I've named us. We play really well together. When I go on stage, I know that he's going to be locked in with me, and I'm going to lock in with him. And there's no more kind of chasing the ball. It's going to be locked in. It's going to be solid. And I love playing with Freddie, and he's a great vibe. So he brought a lot of energy. Plus, sonically, he's got a really deep sound. His first bass player idol was Geezer Butler, and he has that sound. And I think it goes without saying that it's made our sound much deeper and heavier. And just like Geezer Butler's sound does for Black Sabbath, it's a good heavy sound, and for Geezer, and it's a great sound for Freddie.
Okay, just before we time out, because we're going to be timing out very short, we'll come back in 5 minutes if that's okay with you guys and carry on. But I'm just going to ask you very quickly, why Brotherhood of Metal?
Why Brotherhood of Metal? Why the title?
Yeah.
When I started writing those lyrics, it just occurred to me that there really is this camaraderie that I had witnessed from the metal community, whether you're playing like deathcore or you're playing traditional heavy metal or whatever. The real metal fans are all part of one community. They're elitists, don't get me wrong. Some people only listen to this, but the majority of the metal fans are true metal, whatever it is. They have respect for it. They may not love it, may not want to listen to it, but they respect it. And so that was the idea of writing Brotherhood of Metal, because I've seen that camaraderie and that love and that respect that the metal community gives to each other.